Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live. It's Maggie, Nurse Training and Advocacy. Look at that. This doesn't look like it's the light. Doesn't look quite right, does it? How are you guys doing? Welcome. Let me get my light situated here. I took a course this week where they show you how to arrange your light and your electronics when you are doing these videos. Anyway, welcome. We can wait for a few more people to attend, to log on, to join us. I think today we have a really good topic because there is a lot going on in our world. And not just, not just in nursing, it's everywhere. But anyway, how you guys doing? How was your week? I was fine. I mean, I'm busy as always. I don't know why I'm so busy, but I am. I was taking a online course, and that kept me real busy. So I'm happy to be with you. And says go live. I thought I was on Facebook. I am now. So we are live on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome to the live. Today we're going to talk about how to keep yourself from being legally exposed as a nurse. There are many cases going around in the country. Nurses are being criminally charged for things that I have to say probably had been going on. I'm not making excuses for errors that have happened. And medicine is not an exact science. And occasionally we do have things that happen. And, but we have always, encouraged transparency. If you make a mistake, you own up to it, you report it, and then there is education, then there is remediation, and then we change systems, we put protocols in place to, to try. Hi, Lynn, good to see you. To make sure that we don't repeat the same thing again. But what's happening now is that a bunch of nurses are getting criminally charged, exposed, and it's almost like they're trying to make an example out of them. And, some of the cases happened in 2020 at the height of COVID. So now all of a sudden things have calmed down a bit. Guess who they go after? The nurse. So I know when I graduated nursing in the 1980s, there were many classes and in-services that we were mandated to attend about the legal responsibilities of nurses. And, as I was, when I went back to nursing in the 2014 or 15, I noticed a certain nonchalance, about the nurses, and I was like, you guys are a little bit too comfortable with your license. And I could not understand that. I'm like, you should really be more concerned about, keeping yourself safe and keeping that patient safe so you don't end up in court. And I think that's going to be a wake up call for nursing in general. Now that we realize nurses are not seen as these little angels and cape, floating around and doing good, because I don't believe that people see nurses like they used to see us before. Someone just posted that nursing is the most respected profession. And it's true. That's been true for the last, I don't know, decade or so, right? But I said, I don't know that people look at nurses that way. I would love to do a poll and ask people, what do you think of nurses? Do you think it's the safest profession? But these cases that have just come up definitely is going to do a number on our reputation. I personally feel that it is a distraction from all the issues that are happening in nursing, in our hospitals, in our nursing homes. So while they are working, doing the shenanigans behind closed doors, I believe that their PR people told them, you need to find a way to take the focus off of you. I do a weekly chat on my other channel. And one thing I spoke about this week was you have to understand how the system works. I think my daughter calls it the matrix. But it's just that in a capitalistic society, you have to understand that money and power and business, these reign supreme, okay? And then the people who own the money and the power and all the businesses, they're actually the ones running the show. And it is like an exclusive club, and they're all out to protect their own interests as a whole. And how do you see that all the time? Like with the opioid cases that happened with this, I forgot the name of this family, Big Pharma, right? And they were pushing the oxycodone and oxycontin and just, telling doctors to just prescribe, prescribe, prescribe. So now, after 20 years and so many thousands of people dead, that's the way we work in America. We react instead of being proactive. So after people died, and now they go after everybody else. But, all the states and everybody got charged and they're paying money, but the families who were behind the push, they weren't criminally charged. They say, okay, we're going to give so many million or many billion, but we don't want to admit guilt. And I was like, I'm not surprised. That's just the way it is. So, because about 60 to 70% of our long term care facilities are owned by businessmen, they are owned by those angel investors. And angel investors are businessmen who say, okay, we want to diversify our portfolio. We want to find businesses where we can get a good return on our money. And in the 80s and 90s, long term care became one of those pockets where they could feel like, oh, we can make a good return. We can get a good return. So they invested heavily. And you saw a bunch of mergers and acquisition. People are consolidating. A company can own 50, 100, 200 of these facilities. Okay. When you have that many people, that many not people, entities under one umbrella, unless you're going to run your business like a Walmart, you know, you're going to lose that sense of empathy. And this is, we're taking care of patients and quality care. And I say again, they could make the argument that, well, we're the business people. We provide you with the money to do what you need to do. Now, you as nurses, you go and you develop, you deliver that quality care and that empathy and the caring and all that. We're paying you to do the hand holding and to do all the mushy stuff, right? And that's what they will tell you. I mean, I was a business person. I don't have a problem with that as long as we don't lose sight that at the end of the day, our job is to take care of patients. So these cases that we had in the news lately, the Redonda Vaughn girl who gave the other medication instead of the Versed, that was a failure. No one is going to tell you that this nurse didn't do something wrong. But like Jaco, when Jaco comes and Jaco does a review and eval of a case, they don't look at the perpetrator. They don't look at the one person who makes a mistake. Jaco is big at looking at processes. They want to look and see what was happening, what was the situation, what were the circumstances that kind of predisposed this person into making that error. Now, this nurse, I don't know the really details about it, but it wasn't her unit. She was floating. She wasn't familiar. Something was wrong with the Pyxis system. You have things that happen. But of course, at the end of the day, as a nurse, as a clinician, as a professional, as a licensed person, she should have had the foresight to say, okay, what can I do to make sure I'm doing the right thing? Whether it is to call somebody who's local, who's familiar with the area, whether it is to call her manager or something, you know what I'm saying? So failure all around. But who gets criminally charged? The nurse. The nurse. Another case, there's a nurse in Philadelphia. Somebody had fallen and she also had to plead guilty for negligence. There was another travel nurse. I forgot what state that was in. I think it was a week or two ago. She had like 36, 39 patients, and she found somebody on the floor. From what I heard, and don't quote me, she did not assess the patient the way the patient should have been assessed, and that person sadly passed away. Now, it could have been that this person had all kinds of issues. Apparently, he'd had multiple falls and he was a CVA and he probably was on blood thinners and had a brain bleed. There were circumstances, but still, a human being lost his life. So that's major. So that nurse also was criminally charged. Now, this week, we just learned that two people, a DON and a DON, were arrested. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's like there is going to be more emphasis on going back and finding all this stuff. And listen, if they're going to go through the records to find people at fault, boy, they're going to be busy. So lawyers are going to be making oogles of money because there is a lot to go around in those facilities. And again, I feel like there is a sense of a certain nonchalance. People don't realize the importance of assessment and follow up and documentation and being truthful, right? So this is what we're going to talk about. You can't afford to be blasé and say, oh, she's 90 years old. Who cares? Well, somebody does. What if it was your grandmother? You cannot afford to be nonchalant when it comes to somebody's life. Also, this week in the news, this doctor who was indicted for prescribing too much pain medication with fentanyl, he was charged, but he was acquitted this week on all charges. But yet those nurses were hung to dry. I don't want to get political, but again, understand that you are working within the system. You're working in a system that favors male. Doctors are regarded up here. Nurses are regarded down here. Somebody should have told you as a nurse that if you go to court and it is your word against the physician's word, the physician's word will prevail most all the time. Okay? So that's why we tell nurses you cannot be intimidated and not question a physician. He is a physician, he's a human being, male or female. They put their clothes, their pants on the same way. If you have any question about, because there are some bad doctors out there, just like there are bad nurses. If you are a nurse and somebody falls and you don't follow through, you don't do the assessment, you don't do the neuro checks, you're a bad nurse. I don't have any words for it. You're not using your professional judgment. And that's why when you go to court, they're going to hang you. They're going to hang you because you are not doing what you are licensed and trained to do. But don't think that when it comes to justice, that they're going to give you a pass because you're a nurse. Things have changed. Okay, this is no longer the case. No one is going to say, oh, she's a nurse. She's my nurse. I love her so much. She didn't mean it. Mm-mm. Times have changed in these Americas. Okay. You guys need to, let's go back to the basics of what it is, all the legalities. As a nurse, whether you went to a 2 year school, whether you went to a 4 year school, I am pretty sure your instructors drilled into you the importance of practicing in a safe environment. You cannot hide behind, I didn't know. You cannot give the excuse that we were short staffed. You cannot say, well, I told the CNA to do it and she didn't do it. You cannot say, I called my manager. When you have a question about a patient, for example, it's not just a fall. Let's say a doctor gives you an order and you're like, because let's face it, every single one of us has had an incident where we give the wrong medication or the wrong dose. I did. I remember I was a brand new nurse. I was working in an environment, it was a teaching hospital. We had residents, interns, and this doctor, I can't even visualize her. She was like a first year resident, and I loved her. She gave me an order for aminophylline for a patient who was asthmatic, and I was like, even as a new nurse, I was like, this is kind of a high dose. I don't think this is correct. So I call her and I say, you give me this order. I think it's a little bit too much. She said, no, 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 that's what I want. I said, are you sure? Yeah, that's what I want. As a brand new nurse, I didn't know to go to maybe my manager and say, what do you think? I called that intern or resident and she's like, it's okay. But I think, we didn't have Google then, but I'm sure we had a PDL somewhere. I could have looked it up. So I gave it. I didn't call my manager. I didn't call anybody. The next day, I think I worked 3 to 11. The next day, I am coming on shift, and outside this person's door, there was like a crowd of intern, medical students, and residents, and everybody was. And then as I was approaching, and they all turned and stared at me, and I was like, "Ooh, what happened?" And then they told me, they said, "Oh, she went into an SVT because she had too much aminophylline and her heart went crazy, but we were able to calm her down." Oh my God. If you have ever given the wrong medication and done a med error, you know how you felt. I felt terrible. I was mortified. I was sad. I was crying. I think I felt bad for 2 whole weeks but lesson learned. Okay. I was I was lucky. Nothing happened to that lady. She could have coded. God forbid she could have died, and then I wouldn't have been here. But I learned that if I'm uncomfortable, I needed to go further with my concern until I got the result that I needed, and not to say, well, she's a doctor, she knows better. Mm-mm. I'm the one administering it. Okay. So as a nurse, you learn in school that because you have a license to protect, you are the person, you closest to the patient after the CNA, that anything you are providing to this patient, you're responsible for. That's why you do the 5 rights. And that's why we told, people think that the Redonda Vaught lady, she was at fault because she did not confirm the right medication. And that's why she is again at fault. That's why she is criminally charged, right? So you have to understand that the buck stops with you. You can't blame anybody. Now, in today's environment where we have Google, WebMD, Mayo Clinic, and at your phone, if you have a question about a medication, you look it up. So now we go to, in order for you to provide safe care, you have to be comfortable with your skills. That's why, as a nurse, you cannot afford to just say, I don't know. Let me tell you guys, I travel when I go see patients in those skilled nursing facilities. Before I get in my car, I hook my phone, I go on YouTube, and I put something on, whether it's about psych meds, whether it's about assessment, whether it's a podcast, whatever it is. I use my time effectively. I'm not sitting, excuse me, in traffic for an hour and waste that time where I could fill my mind with some good stuff that's going to help me. You can go to continuing education. You can do online courses. You can go and be trained. Now, COVID, everything is Zoom or whatever, but you have opportunities. A lot of this stuff is free. Now, if you work for a hospital system, there is oodles of information you can access. So there is no excuse for you to say, I don't know. It is your responsibility to know. Now, in terms of onboarding and mentoring, I know it's not the same. I mentioned before that when I was a new nurse, I had like 6 weeks of orientation. I had a mentor. I didn't have an assignment for 6 weeks. I just followed this nurse around, and she was a great mentor. Now, all we hear about is nurses eating their young, the people who they ask to mentor you, they don't want to. I was a supervisor and I had a new nurse come, and of course there is no designated mentor, and I can sit down and show this person certain things, but I am not, in a position to just be her mentor at every turn and everything that I do because I don't have an assignment. So I went to one of my nurses who had been there, who I think is a good nurse, and I said, "Oh, I'd like you to let so and so shadow you today." In front of this new person, she's like, "Oh, no, no, I'm not up for it today. Find somebody else. Find somebody else." And I looked at her and I'm like, I said, and I didn't want her to feel bad and I didn't want to counsel her in front of this new person. So I said, well, that's not really nice. I said, what is she going to think? We don't want her, we want her to come and help. And, it was just this kind of thing that we don't feel that we are obligated to help the next nurse. You should. Because if you teach a nurse what you know in your own environment, she's going to become a strong person and she's going to be an asset to the unit. So you should feel, I think it's a duty that for you to pay it forward, right? And to onboard this person. You cannot say, "Oh, I don't want to do it." Yes, it would have been ideal to have a designated mentor, but that boat has sailed a long time ago. They don't have that money. They don't want to spend money to do that. And that's the first thing I should have said before I started here. In talking about the system, just like I gave you like a little glimpse of what I'm talking about, you have to, if you agree to work in an environment, you have to agree to work within the system. That doesn't mean you don't keep asking for things, resources, staff, support, and all that. But if you agree, that's the thing. No one can make you do a job if you don't want to do it. Where I am in my state, it's an what do they call that? It's a state where they can take the job away, you can leave. There is no contract between employer and employee. Everybody is free to work or to leave. So, if you're still in this job, it's because you have decided, I want to stay here. Therefore, you are obligated to be the best you can be and work within the system with what you got. So, it doesn't pay for you to keep saying, well, they don't have any mentors, there's no support system. Find it. Find your support. If you decide you want to keep this job, you want to make the best of it, right? Okay. So, when you were in school and they were telling you assessment, okay? Now, I realized when I went into long term care, I was thinking I was still in the CCU, maybe for a week. You realize having two patients versus 20, It's a whole different ballgame. There is no way you're going to know everything about this patient. When I was in the ICU, I knew everything about that patient from the top of their head to their toes. I know everything. I know every lab. I know the history. I was involved with their families. We don't have that level. We don't have that kind of time. So you have to find a way to learn to say what is most important. What is it that I need to focus on today? Now, when you have 20 patients, of course, you want to make sure they're fed. You want to get their medication. Turning in position, they're supposed to be every 2 hours, but who has time to do that these days? So you may, even once or twice in your shift, help the CNA flip that person, put a pillow behind their back, and do the best you can. Again, the best you can. But that is not something that's going to be detrimental or it's a life and death situation, of course. Having said that, I get very embarrassed when we receive patients in our long-term care facility who, let's say they had COVID or they were really sick in the hospital. They were in there for 3, 4 weeks and they come out with a wound this big on their butt. That I'm embarrassed as a nurse. I'm also embarrassed when I have a patient who's saying, "Oh, my stomach hurt," and they start throwing up, and we order a KUB and they say, "Oh, we don't see anything." Send them to the hospital. They say, "Oh, they're full of stool. They haven't pooped in 7 days." I get embarrassed, right? Because those are basic nursing skills. And I know we get so caught up in the charting and the passing of the pills and the dressings, and everything gets you know, forgotten. But common sense. If you have a patient who had hip surgery and they come on your floor and they're getting oxycontin every 4 hours or hydrocodone, you don't need someone to tell you that you need to do bowel care, right? So most nursing homes or hospitals have routine orders for Colace and Senecart. Give it. Don't wait for the patient to ask. Give them Miralax. Those are the normal, simple nursing skills. Okay? So be proactive. I tell my nurses, make sure you round about your patient. You can't afford to be lazy when you're a nurse. You don't just come in the morning, you do your assessment, such as it is, you put your eyes on them. You're so concerned. I see nurses so concerned with the med pass, med pass, med pass. And I'm like, there are other things that are more important than med pass. You have these people in nursing home with 8 vitamins. Why do they need 8 vitamins? This is the time you ask your physician, you need to cut off some of that stuff. Give them multivitamin, maybe a thiamine or something, but the rest of it they don't need. Okay? So don't waste your time with those, but make sure they get their blood pressure pills and all the other ones. Okay. So make sure you prioritize and know what is the best or the most important thing for that patient. And that's why handoffs are so important. Reports are so important. And I know sometimes we don't even get report, especially as supervisors. But if I were a nurse coming on, I would insist on doing visual reports round with that nurse. If she says she doesn't want to do it, you say, "Well, I need to see that patient with you so I know what's going on." So please do that. Don't believe what this nurse tells you that patient is, that the patient didn't do. Go in that room. Put your eye on that patient with the outgoing nurse so you know what's going on, because that becomes your responsibility. Okay? So prioritize, assess your patient. Yes, pass your meds. Don't neglect your labs. Don't say, "Oh, I didn't know." If the patient's starting to look a little peaked, you need to do an assessment. Your CNAs, depending on the kind of relationship you have with your CNAs, right? They're going to come to you and tell you if they see something that is wrong. You need to learn to respect and believe your CNA. When they say, "I need you to come and take a look at Mrs. So and so," you need to go take a look at Mrs. So and so, because they know those residents and they know if something is going on. So your CNA is that she's your eyes and ears, or he, right? So learn to help whenever you can. answer some lights, help her turn and position a patient, help her get a patient on and off the pot. Those things build camaraderie and build trust, and that CNA feels that, oh, she got my back. I know when I go into a new building and I see a CNA in there, I'm like, you need some help? And they look at me. They say, you gonna help? I'm like, sure. Why can't I help you? I'm a nurse too. Boom. Even as an NP, I still help. You know what I mean? Let's just not get caught up and hung up in all these things. So prioritizing is important. Assessing. Okay, let's talk about falls. Because if you look at it, besides the error that happened with that Versed with that girl, some of the other cases that we're talking about right now have to do with falls. I know in hospitals people fall a lot. We're giving people all kinds of pain medication. When I get my patients from the nursing home, they're all on Seroquel, some kind of antipsychotic. If the patient is confused because they are in a state of, this word I never forget, when they have like a UTI and they're confused. I can't ever remember that word. But they get confused. So the first thing they do, give them some Valium anymore. They do Seroquel. Okay, when I come to me, I got to take them off. But people fall in hospitals too. But in the hospital, they can put them in restraint. They can tie them to the bed, which, but we can't do that in long-term care. We couldn't even put bed rails on long-term care. And this is the thing that burns you in long-term care. It's like whenever something happens, we just go straight to the other side. We forget to be in the middle. So now you have everybody in a skilled nursing facility with the bed, not even on low, with no rails, and then you wonder why they fall. Of course they fall. But why do we have to make rules and laws? The whole thing needs to be reworked. The whole thing needs to be looked at. And this is instead of saying we're going to take $320 million off of skilled nursing care, why don't we take time to research and enact laws that make sense? These lawyers come and they make so much noise, and then everybody retreats and like, oh, okay, so and so fall, and your grandfather died, therefore now everybody is going to be without, rails. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So again, thinking about that, what can we do and what can we change? Because we're not up here making those rules. I wish we were, but we're not. So we have to work with what we got. If you have a patient fall on your shift, what I always see is that we go and we do an assessment. They're big on doing the skin assessment. Yeah, they look at those skin tears and they treat the skin tears. We put some TAO. We're good at doing that. But in addition, what I always tell nurses, if I find a patient in the bathroom on their backs, ask them, oh, let's get him. I'm like, no. Wait a minute. What if this person had a broken neck? What if they have a broken back? You don't rush and get somebody off the floor. No. If that person needs to be evaluated, I will be the first one to say no. I want you to call EMS, let them come, use the board, use the neck brace, and go and assess that patient, and then they bring that patient back. Don't scamp on that. And that's what happened to this nurse. This patient had multiple falls. Think about it. Again, you're a professional, use your judgment. You have a patient who was a CVA patient. Chances are, after a CVA, if they didn't have a bleed, they're going to be on Eliquis, on Plavix, or some kind of blood thinners, right? Well, you have a very fragile little person who's fallen 4 or 5 times. What do you think the likelihood is? This person hit his head or her head, and maybe there's a bleed in there. You don't know that. I'm telling you, as a nurse, as a provider, if you were to call me and I would say, where did you find that patient? In what position did you find that patient? Because a lot of time they're not able to tell you if they hit their head, if they hit their head on the side of that hard toilet bowl. They won't be able to tell you. But you I mean, neurochecks can only tell you so much. You only gonna see something if this person's eye is rolling in their head and if they have a major bleed. But if somebody has a small seeping bleed, you're not gonna see those. And if you miss it and then you haven't seen that patient for like 4 or 5 hours, a lot can happen in those 5 hours. That's why you send those people out, have them do a CAT scan. Now, when you come back, you continue with the neuro checks. In one of those cases, this nurse lied. She said she was doing the assessment when she wasn't. You can't do that. And one caveat, this nurse was a traveler nurse. Do you think you can go to court and say, oh, I'm not staff, I'm a traveler, I don't know? That's not going to save you. You cannot hide behind that. Okay? You are going to be judged on your professional judgment. Granted, if you look at all these cases that just came up, did you see anything in the news about the policies and procedures of the facility? They should be taken into consideration, but no one's talking about that. They're just talking about the nurses' failed judgment. And that's what you're going to stand on. That's what you need to grill into your head. And then your documentation should be spotless. I recommend that you time stamp, just like if you're doing a code, you're going to say at 2:08 this happened, at 2:20 this happened, at 2:30 this happened. Okay? So don't cringe on that. Skimp, I should say. Don't bring the patient to the nurse's station so you can have your eye on that patient. That's not enough. What if this person had a fracture and you're sitting them in a chair, right? So now they're in pain. If they're demented, they can't tell you they're in pain. So they're restless and you're giving them, maybe some clonazepam, Ativan, or whatever. You're making everything worse because you did not do the proper assessment in the beginning. You need to understand that your patients are fragile, that they are frail, their bones are brittle, even their head. Things can happen in these old people, that they don't respond to everything like you do. Their little bodies are fragile. Understand that. It's better to do more than not do enough. Now, I know there is a pressure from administration to tell you, oh, we have too many return to hospital. Don't send those people to hospital. There are a lot of things that you can try to treat in your facilities. There are things that you cannot. And that's where you need to understand. If a patient needs a CAT scan, you can't substitute that with neurochecks. If a patient is suspected of having, hit their head, or if they've hit the floor hard and you have cement or marble, send them out. Don't wait until they start having pain, excuse me, and then call the physician. Because the physician, you calling somebody like me on the other side of the phone, we don't know. We don't have our eye on that patient. We're relying on you to tell us what happened. So your assessment is so on point. So don't listen to a DON or administrator who tells you, oh, why did you send him out? Nothing happened. He came out. They didn't say anything. Yes, thank you. They didn't say anything, but you did the right thing. So if you're in a place, in a situation where they're coming down on you because you using your professional nursing judgment to send your people out and they keep breathing down your neck, you better leave that job. Because I'm telling you, after they tell you not to send them out, if something comes back, they're gonna say, oh, why didn't you send her out? They're not gonna say we told you not to. Understand that. You're always going to be standing alone. In a court of law, you can only defend yourself. You can only defend your action or lack thereof. Don't think that your boss is going to fight for you, defend you. Don't think the physician will. Don't think the hospital will. Don't think the nursing home will. They're going to say, I'm not a nurse. You're the nurse. The administrator with these two ladies, these two, DON and ADON, right? The patient had fallen. She had apparently bruises, and they didn't do any assessment. They didn't go after the administrator, even though he said, I am new. He's new, but he's not a clinician. Okay? You're the one with the license. Understand that. All right. So I said the old days where we used to have all kind of support, we don't have that anymore. Educate yourself. You have no excuse. There is a lot of information available for you. You need to educate yourself. Now we have more exposure more than ever. Now, you see, when we are in a situation where things are tight and there's a lot of blame to go around, and they've already identified that we are the weakest link. We, as nurses, are the ones with the license, so they're coming after us. I'm not saying leave nursing. I don't think that's the solution. But you need to talk to management and say, okay, I'm concerned about these things. I think a lot of them are starting to listen a little bit more. I think there's a lot more that needs to happen. But if, let's say, staffing wise, this nurse who accepted 39 patients, which is not unusual, you guys know, night shift. I remember I did agency for, and I went into a skilled nursing facility. It was a 3 to 11 on a holiday. I'll never forget that. This staffing person called me and she begged me to come. And then when I got there, 3 to 11, it wasn't 11 to 7, and I saw a nurse sitting there, it was just her. And I said, oh, it's you and I. She's like, oh, no, honey, I'm leaving. You it. I'm like, oh, how many patients? 60 patients, 3 to 11. Okay. So you can imagine how that went. It was a nightmare. But do you think I went back to that place? Hell to the no. No. If I and I stayed till like 2, 3 o'clock to make sure I gave, sat all my notes, give all my meds. I was doing dressing at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the 11 to 7 were like, you still here? What are you doing here? They're just sitting there playing on their phone because I'm responsible. And I don't want anybody to come to me to say I didn't do it. I did it, but I didn't go back because you don't want to keep putting yourself in dangerous situation. You may do it one time, but if you keep doing it, something's going to happen. We have nurses who will be posting on some pages. Oh, I just did 2 doubles and they just begged me, and I have to go back after 2 hours of sleep. Pray for me. And I'm like, oh, you pray for yourself. I say, you are crazy if you think you are mentally able to provide safe care after working 3 doubles in a row and you had 2 hours of sleep. Be smart, people. The money is not worth it. First of all, you're going to be paying a lot of it in taxes. You are hurting yourself in your body by not taking care of yourself and overworking yourself and exposing yourself by delivering unsafe care. I remember when I was in CCU, we worked with a surgeon. He was really good at doing open heart surgeries. But the most he could do was 2 in a day. One day, I think it was about 7 o'clock, they called the who, not the ER. Well, I guess the ER said they had a patient downstairs, and the patient was, bye, thank you, Lynn. Um, there was a patient downstairs who needed some help, and he needed to have an operation right away. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. She loves my eyeglasses. Um, so the doctor had just finished doing 2 procedures, and he was, because you're standing, you're hunched over, and he was tired, right? So he he was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do it. I haven't eaten." So we're like, "Okay, we'll go get you a sandwich." He said, "I'm so tired," and we're just rubbing him, and then they're downstairs. They're saying, "Oh, is he coming? This patient is gonna crash. What are we gonna do?" And that doctor was struggling with himself because he knew that he could not physically, mentally go in there and do the best that he could and provide do that surgery. He ended up doing it, but we were all, we watched him struggle because he knew the danger of not being mentally fit to do that. So why do you think you as a nurse, I know you may think you're a super nurse, but you're not. Your brain has only the capacity to work efficiently for so long. When I was younger, I still go to bed really late. I want you to know that. But I sleep in a little bit, so it's not that bad. But it used to be like 12, 1 o'clock. I mean, I'm in the zone. I'm just focused and everything. But after a while, it's like my brain shuts off after a time. I may force myself to do something, but I'm not at my best. Okay. So please understand that you should not be working, caring for people if you're not mentally fit, because one little mistake, and it's not just giving the wrong medication, it's missing something in your assessment. That's what is hard. When you like, well, you missed those subtle signs. The patient had a tachycardia. There was a low grade temperature. Did you listen to her lungs? Did you palpate his abdomen? You have to give yourself time to do these things. You are a professional. You are a licensed person. You have a license to protect. And the difference again, we have people's lives in our hands. If nothing, you get nothing from me today. Understand that we hold people's lives in our hands. Therefore, we cannot afford to slack off. We cannot afford to just say, I didn't know. I told so and so to do it. Make sure that everything you do every day, you're able to defend. As a nurse practitioner, I'll tell you one thing. And I think I said that last time. We have little apps on our phones, in terms of medication and what we use for this, for that. I am always double checking, even though I know up here what the dosage is of the drug. I'm looking, right? Because I want to be sure. I don't want to assume. So sometimes I'm here at 12, 1 o'clock, writing a note. I want to make sure every single note that I write can stand on its own. Every single note that I write, if somebody were to call me, I can defend what I did and didn't do. So if you call a manager to say, well, there's only one nurse here, and there's a lot of that going on these days. There's only one nurse here and there are 40 patients and the IVs and wounds, and I can't do it. And you say somebody needs to come. How many times I hear that we called, nobody showed up. There was one facility though, I went, they said the state is in there every single week, because when the CNAs are short and they call management, nobody comes up. They call the state. I'm not saying you should go and do that all the time, but that is an option. Because if you're going to continue to take care of people in unsafe environments, maybe you need to call a third party right now. And then, and I know a lot of times people are worried about losing their jobs, but right now, if you're a nurse, you can get a job. And that's why I encourage you to position yourself to a point where you are very marketable. That means get a certification or two. If you can go to school, take one course at a time until you improve your skills over and over, so that if you need to make a move, you can make a move. You should not feel like you stuck, that this company, this building owns you. Nobody should own you, right? You should be able to say, I can't work under these circumstances. The patient care is being affected. Look what's happening with these nurses. They're hanging them to dry, even though they know exactly what was happening in their building. It's on you, okay? So, what I think we need to do is, I don't have a problem being assertive, but I understand that some nurses may not be assertive. What is assertiveness? Assertiveness is being able to not defend, but have a discussion about something that is of concern to you, to somebody higher up, without being disrespectful or disruptive. And it's just like, okay, this what's happening. I don't think I can keep doing that. Once in a while something happens, I understand. But if it's something that continues to happen, I'm sorry, I can't. Okay. You need to be able to talk to your manager in that way, and not just huffing and puffing and throwing things, and say, I have a license to protect. I cannot work under these conditions. Okay. And make sure you write it down. Document, document, document. Whether you send an email, then you're going to have proof. It's going to be in your phone, or whether you write it down. In the case of those falls, like I said, make sure you timestamp 6:05. CNA came to me and said, don't do this long one paragraph. That's not gonna, that doesn't give a lawyer all that happened in that 4 or 5 hour span. Don't do it like that. Just say 6:05, the CNA came to me, said she found Mrs. So and so on the floor. I went with so and so, we assessed the patient, this is what we saw, and then based on our finding, this is what we did. Whether we put the patient in bed, the patient was able to move all extremities, we turned, checked the skin, the patient did okay with all the neuro checks. I called the doctor, called the family, boom, 6:15, I went and look at Mrs. So and so. This is how she does. 6:30, make sure you CYA. You guys have heard that term. I can't say it on YouTube, but you've heard that term CYA. There is a reason for it. And only yours you need to be concerned about, because that's the one they're going to hang, in court. So learn how to be assertive. Learn how to speak up for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you but you. Learn how to do those things, okay? Uh Empathy. And I think it's difficult sometimes after you've worked in a facility for so long. After a while you become kind of blasé, it's like, she's 90 years old, nothing's going to happen. Oh, please don't say that. Please don't say that. Because as a nurse, every life should be precious to you. And this thing about this nurse who did not know what the patient's code status is, that's another thing. I know in the facilities I work at, when you go into PCC, you look in the system, everybody's code status is in there. So if somebody has an emergency, you find somebody on the floor or in bed unresponsive. So that's what you call somebody come here. You push the button, somebody come in, you say, go get the chart. You designate someone to go get that chart. Okay. While you're doing a quick assessment, somebody is running to get that chart, because many times inside that chart is going to be that patient's code status. In that case, that travel nurse said it was nowhere to be found. So let's say if you're a nurse, you're a traveler, or your agency, you don't know that patient, you go send someone to look for the chart or go in the system, and they can't find the patient status. What do you think you should be doing? The patient is pulseless. You start CPR. If you don't know what the code status is, you assume this person is a full code. It's better for you to do the CPR, send that patient out, and then maybe in the ER they can figure out, call the family, what they want to do. CYA. You can't just say, oh, we couldn't find the code, we couldn't find the code status, couldn't find the chart, so we pronounce the patient dead. What? Again, how do you process information? How do you make decisions in an emergency? Those are important skills you have to learn. You can't say, no one can tell you that if you don't know a patient code status, you automatically assume they're DNRs. No one is going to tell you that. You don't have what, this is not your responsibility. That is not your place to decide who's a DNR and who's not. And in a case that you don't know, you assume that person is a full code. Come on, guys. Come on. So I put empathy there because I think, just like I said, if you've been doing this for a while, you may think, but please don't do that. And if you get to that point where you don't care what happens to a patient, you become so blasé, it's time for a change. You may want to change profession or just take a sabbatical. Just step away for a little bit. It's okay. And then, a lot of us, when we get away from nursing, we miss it and we go back. When you go back, you'll be more refreshed. We'll have a new perspective. Yeah. If you become so blasé and nonchalant and uncaring with no empathy and you just dry and cold, time for a change. Okay? Staffing, oh my gosh. We don't want to do a whole episode on staffing, but I think it's getting a little bit better. I see in my facilities it's getting a little bit better. I know they're trying. Are they doing enough? Probably not. Because, whoever holds the purse, they just tight. Inflation, all kinds of stuff, gas prices. So everybody, again, you're working within that matrix, the system. You got to do what you can. So they're trying to do the best they can. Just make sure you're alert that you don't put yourself in those unsafe situations, okay? And then try to work with administration because, as I said before in a previous video, they're under stress too. They're not the ones to decide who works, how many staff members they have. They get directives from the corporate office. So a lot of times they're under pressure as well. So don't close off communication. Make sure you're always communicating with your management because they're not the enemy. They're not the enemy. The system is broken, but they're not the enemy. So, in conclusion, guys, we have like 2 minutes. How do you reduce your exposure? First is to be on your A game, okay? You went to school, you decided you wanted to be a nurse. And if you're not in nursing for the right reason, you have all kinds of options to you. I'm just saying. You don't have to be a nurse if you don't want to be a nurse. If you're not enjoying it, the sky's the limit for you. But if you choose to be on your A game, be the best you can, the best knowledgeable, the most knowledgeable, the best trained nurse. If you don't know, make sure you shadow people who know, read a lot, listen to podcasts. Like I said, when you're driving, pop that YouTube and start listening. When you're walking, listening. I mean, learning is eternal, infinite. That you can always, there's not no limit to what you can learn. Okay, get a certification or two, go back to school if you need to. And yeah, it could be tough, but we've all done it. I was married with kids, going to school, get BSN, graduate school. If you want to do it, you'll do it. So no whining, please. Okay, learn to be assertive. Know what your rights are, know what your limitations are, and your legal responsibility, in a nutshell, is to deliver safe care. Make sure your patients are safe. The medication you administering is safe. The condition the patient is in is safe. You don't leave somebody That's why you need to round. Patients shouldn't be in a diaper for 8 hours and not changing. Be on your CNA. If your CNA can see the kind of nurse you are and what your standards are, trust me, they'll shape up. I'm always picking up the covers, checking my patient. When they're turning them, I'm looking, I'm watching at the skin. Don't just trust what they tell you. They're not the one responsible for that patient. You are. They're working under your license. Did you remember that? Okay. So if you have a CNA who's not doing their work, it's up to you to go to her, take her to the side, say, listen, these are my patients. I'm responsible for them, and I expect you to treat them. If you need me to come and help you, you come and get me. But I don't want to go like at 2 o'clock and find somebody wet and in a, you know, heavy pee diaper. No. So that's not just a supervisor. Right now, we're talking about a regular nurse who's responsible for patients. Okay. So you got to lay the law down. You don't play when it comes to taking care of your patients. Okay. So make sure you speak up, talk to management, talk to your CNAs. Now the thing is, if you have your CNA and you just chummy and we're going out, we're buddies, yeah, it's gonna be difficult for you to tell that CNA, you need to go change Mrs. So and so. She needs some water. I need to make sure you feed so and so. Okay. Like I said, it's not personal. It's not personal. We just need to take care of that patient. And then talk to management. Try to develop a rapport with them because I think you can, what's the word they say? You can attract more with honey than with vinegar or something like that. They're not the enemy. Talk to them because this is that they're building. Most of them care about their patient. I think they could do a better job in who they hire to do this position. But again, that is not something that you can have anything to do with, right? We want to work within the confine of what we can do. Okay, guys, I hope you found this helpful. Um, I think Lynn had left, or is she still watching? I don't know if anybody has any question. I am looking. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you next week. If I don't see anything, any questions? I mean, I'm passionate about these topics, so I kind of tend to go ad lib a lot. But I think this needed to be said to remind everybody to come back to focus that we cannot be nonchalant about taking care of our patients. We can't. We can go to jail. And I say I don't look good in orange. All right, guys. Talk to you soon. Au revoir. See you next week. Bye.